My name is Mary Wollstonecraft, and I have been dead for more than 2 centuries. In my lifetime, they called me a hyena in petticoats. That was meant as an insult. I took it as a compliment. It meant I was dangerous to the right people. I wrote a book called A Vindication of the Rights of Woman in 1792. I argued that women are not decorations, not angels, not dolls, but rational beings who deserve education, independence, and equal citizenship. For that, polite society treated me as a scandal dressed up as a woman. Thanks to the curious magicians here at A Most Excellent Adventure, I've had a look at the world you've built since then. You have my face on murals, my words on t-shirts. You call me a founding mother of feminism. I suppose that's progress. But then I turn on your news, and I see men in suits discussing whether women should have control over their own bodies, as if this were a new and complicated question. I see courts stripping away rights that my daughters and granddaughters fought to win. I see legislatures making lists of which books girls may read, which identities they may express, which truths they may speak. I see women doing the work of a nation and still being told their highest calling is to remain quiet and grateful. So if you don't mind, I'd like to talk to you, woman to woman, woman to man, across 2 centuries, about what it really means to treat half the human race as a kind of ornamental underclass, and what it means to stop. And since your winter festivals are approaching, when families gather and you recite fine words about love and dignity, it is an especially good moment to decide whether the women you cherish in private are honored as equals in public. When I was a girl in England, the world made it very clear what my life was meant to be. I was to marry if I could, obey if I must, and disappear when my husband or father or circumstances required it. Virtue for women meant obedience, modesty, silence. Reason, that was for men. Politics, that was for men. Earning your keep, also for men. My task was to be pleasing. Let me translate that into your era. I was supposed to be aesthetic, not autonomous. Presentable, but not powerful. Decorative, not dangerous. You have changed your fashions, but you have not entirely changed that expectation. You tell girls now that they can be anything. Then you put algorithms in their pockets that whisper, no, no, be small, be pretty, be liked. In my day, we had sermons and conduct books. You have social media feeds. The technology is different. The lesson is the same. I argued that the great difference between men and women was not something mysterious in our souls, but something quite obvious in our education. Men were trained to reason, govern, and earn. Women were trained to charm, yield, and marry. We created the very weakness we then use to justify women's subordination. You still do this. You underfund girls' education in vast parts of the world. You pay women less for the same work. You heap unpaid labor, childcare, elder care, emotional care on women's backs and call it love. You elect men who sneer at nasty or unlikable women when they show ambition, anger, or expertise. Then you step back and say, see, women aren't as strong in leadership. They're not as good at math. They're not as interested in power. How convenient. In my era, a woman's survival often depended on attaching herself to a man. Marriage was not just romance. It was her pension, her landlord, her legal system, her future. The law treated wives as property, wrapped in polite language. Yours is less honest, but not always less cruel. You have women who cannot leave violent men because they will lose their health care, their children, their home. You have workplaces that quietly punish mothers for being mothers. You have entire political movements built on the fantasy of returning women to the kitchen, the nursery, the church, as if history has been one long mistake since we stepped outside the drawing room. And now, in your time, you are fighting over whether women may decide what happens inside their own bodies. In my day, abortions were secret, illegal, and often fatal. Women bled to death in backrooms while men debated virtue in Parliament. You like to tell yourselves you are more enlightened now. Some of you are. But when a court in a modern republic declares that women do not have a fundamental right to control their pregnancies, you have stepped back into my century with better lighting. I want to be very clear about this. If the state can force a woman to carry a pregnancy against her will, she is not a free citizen. She is a vessel, a resource, a kind of animated incubator whose virtue is measured by how much of her life she is willing to sacrifice without complaining. You may not use my name and then defend that arrangement. We are not on the same side. Now, I have also watched another curious development in your age. You claim women's equality with your mouths, and then you build entire economies on their exhaustion. You expect women to work as if they did not have children, and mother as if they did not have jobs. They are supposed to do 2 full-time roles, and thank you for the opportunity. When they burn out, you offer them scented candles and inspirational slogans. I have seen your girl boss culture. You took the male obsession with status and conquest, glued glitter to it, and called it feminism. That is not quite what I had in mind. Equality is not about giving women an equal right to exploit and be exploited. It is about remaking the terms of power so that no one, woman or man, has to crush others to stand tall. So let's talk about power, because this is where many of you flinch. You are comfortable with women empowered as consumers. Sell them things. Tell them they are queens, goddesses, icons, as long as someone else owns the company. You are less comfortable with women empowered as decision makers. When a woman runs for office and speaks with force, you dissect her tone. You call her shrill, cold, ambitious, unstable. You demand that she smile more, apologize more, take up less space. You do not do this in the same way to men. You think this is about personality. It is not. It is about centuries of training. You have been taught to see male authority as natural and female authority as suspect, even when you consciously disagree with that belief. I saw this in my reviews. When I wrote about politics, critics called me unsexed, unnatural. When I wrote about female obedience, they nodded politely. To be taken seriously as a thinker, I was told I must first stop being a woman. In your world, we dress that same hostility in psychology and polling. You talk about women not being likable enough. You rarely stop to consider that you have been trained to like women best when they are least threatening. Let me say this plainly. A woman does not become less of a woman when she takes power. She becomes more fully herself. If your idea of womanhood cannot survive her having a voice, your idea is not about care or morality. It is about control. Now, because I can already hear some of you saying, but what about the men? Let me speak to you directly. I did not write for women alone. I wrote for a society that treats men like half-formed tyrants and then wonders why they behave that way. I argued that men too are degraded when they rule over dependents instead of equals. It encourages their worst tendencies, vanity, selfishness, idleness, and starves their better ones, reason, empathy, courage. Look around you. How many men have been told that their worth lies in domination, in conquest, in how many women they can possess, how many rivals they can crush, how loudly they can shout? You think this only harms women. It harms you as well. It traps you in brittle roles. It teaches you that tenderness is weakness, that partnership is submission, that listening is surrender. It makes it very hard to have a real marriage with a real person instead of a flattering mirror that cooks. The liberation of women is not the humiliation of men. It is an invitation to grow up together. If you are afraid of women being free, ask yourself, what part of your identity depends on their submission? Look at that part closely. Does it look like strength, or does it look like fear wrapped in swagger? I'm not asking you to sit in the corner and apologize for being male. I am asking you to become men worthy of equality, not because I fear your power, but because I know you are capable of better. You may wonder why I sound so animated after 200 years in the ground. It is because I see the pattern repeating itself with new costumes. You have politicians who treat women's rights as a kind of seasonal accessory, something to put on in campaign speeches and then misplace when it is time to vote. You have courts that speak the language of tradition and morality while ignoring the lived reality of the women whose bodies and futures they are regulating. You have media that still, after all this time, asks powerful women about their outfits while asking powerful men about their ideas. And then you have young women and young men who are told that feminism has gone too far because some people on the internet were rude to them. Let me be admirably blunt. Feminism has not gone too far until no woman, anywhere, is treated as property, as a second-class citizen, as a vessel, as an afterthought, until no girl is told that her worth lies in who desires her rather than who she chooses to become, until no man believes that his manhood is measured by how effectively he can keep the women in his life small. We are not there. You know this. So what do? Standing where you are, not in abstract history, but in your actual messy lives. If you are a woman, you start by distrusting every voice, human or algorithmic, that profits from your insecurity. Notice how much of your economy depends on convincing you that you are not enough. Not thin enough, not young enough, not soft enough, not agreeable enough. None of that is an accident. A woman who believes she is fundamentally lacking is very easy to sell to and very easy to rule. Educate yourself more fiercely than anyone expects. Demand to understand your rights, your history, your finances, your body. Do not outsource your life to someone who loves you. Love does not replace knowledge. It makes knowledge more urgent. If you are a man, you start by listening without making yourself the center of every conversation about women. When women describe their experiences, discrimination, harassment, the quiet humiliations of everyday life, your first task is not to argue with them or explain that you, personally, are not like that. Your first task is to believe that they know their own lives. Use your voice where it matters. In rooms where no woman is present, speak against the cruel joke, the hostile policy, the decision that treats women as an afterthought. Not because it makes you look enlightened, but because it makes you less of a coward. If you have any power as a boss, a teacher, a legislator, a judge, a parent, examine how your decisions either expand or shrink the autonomy of the women around you. If you find yourself regularly choosing policies that make women more dependent, more frightened, more constrained, do not bother calling yourself an ally. You are simply a more polite kind of adversary. And to all of you, regardless of gender, do not sentimentalize women and call it respect. When you put women on pedestals as pure or holy or naturally nurturing, you are simply gilding the cage. We are not angels. We are not monsters. We are people. That was my radical idea in 1792. Apparently, it still is. Let me end where I began, with the insult they hurled at me, a hyena in petticoats. They meant that I was too loud, too sharp, too unladylike in my defense of women's rights. They would still say that, though they might dress it up as too angry, too radical, too divisive. I am at peace with their disapproval. I did not write for their comfort. I wrote, and I speak now, for the young woman watching this who has been told, in 1,000 small ways, to shrink. To that young woman, I say, do not grow, learn, insist, fail, begin again, refuse to be the pretty backdrop to someone else's story. You are not the scenery. You are a character. And to the young man watching, who feels torn between the old scripts and something he cannot quite name, I say, you are not less of a man for wanting a partner instead of a subordinate. You are more of a human being. That is an upgrade, not a loss. Finally, I would like to thank the remarkable troublemakers here at A Most Excellent Adventure for dragging my ghost into your century. They thought you might need to hear from someone who has watched this argument go in circles for far too long. If you want more of us, more dead philosophers, revolutionaries, monsters, saints, and troublemakers to tell you honestly what they think of your world, then subscribe to this channel. Share it with the people who most need to be uncomfortable. Argue with us, learn from us, outgrow us. I have done my part. The rest is yours.